Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is 12 noon here in the Houston, Texas area, where we are going into our fifth session of the virtual symposium celebrating Jordan Peele's work. Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Dowell-Vest. I will be your cruise director for the next hour and a half. I am the Director of Film and Television Production here at Prairie View A&M University. We are currently celebrating our homecoming here, so it's pretty festive. We got a lot of bing bangs and ding dangs going on in the background. But for the next hour and some change, we are going to talk about inclusion in media production and especially in the classroom. I'm excited to have an amazing panel of filmmakers, educators, artists, leaders, activists, and quite frankly, a panel of just boss women who are leading the way in production. And I'm just speechless, quite frankly, to have this panel together. We're going to hear from folks from the University Film and Video Association, from Edit Media, from the Jefferson School, the African American Heritage Center in Charlottesville, Virginia, and the Propel Center. And without further ado, I just want to bring up a woman who has been our fearless leader with the University Film and Video Association, Wenhwa. Ts'ao. Wenhwa is here again today. You met her yesterday during our welcome and our keynote address when we welcomed Mo Mashadi, and she was in a few more times yesterday. Hey, Wenhwa, what's up?
Hey, how are you? Very good. Thank you so much again for the great opportunity to bring University Film and Video Association into the fold of this amazing symposium. I have learned a lot as a teacher and as a human being.
Excellent.
So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you so much. How do you feel like it's been going so far overall? I mean, I know there've been some great takeaways here and there, but tell me how the symposium has landed on you, and where can we go with it in the future?
Well, one of the things is accountability. We can have a great event like this, and we can have a great discussion about be inclusive in all our practice, in our life. But I think the most important thing we need to do is take action to really, for example, I can speak only for UFVA. For me, as a current president of UFVA, I really would like to collaborate with the foundation board members to bring probably set up, my goal is to try to set up a scholarship for minority serving institution students, and possible scholarship to bring in members for minority serving institution faculty members as well, because limited resources. And so I heard a lot of promises, and then I would like to see what's the next step, that real concrete step that we can take to make that happen, to really change the dynamic of our membership, and to be truly multicultural and inclusive. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's my thought. And also definitely on teaching as well. A lot of great presentations from different faculty member you brought in those yesterday's presentation. I'm very inspired about changing how I can use empathy to change the curriculum and assignments. It is one thing to read all these assignments on the Edit Media. It's very different to watch Chrissy's presentation and to have the faculty really explain how that was applied in her classroom and the effect that it have on her student and on herself as well. Yeah. So I'm very inspired by that.
Ooh. It's almost like opportunities like this, and certainly when it comes to something like a virtual symposium, our national conference that we have every July through the University Film and Video Association, those opportunities to collaborate and turn ideas into functioning, practical curriculum is among what's most exciting for me in an exercise like this. And so I'm especially excited to have the collective that will be joining us in this particular session. I want to take a moment to actually share with you everyone's bios before we get going, because then we can just deep dive into our discussion and get right into it. I want to first introduce Leslie Scott Jones. Leslie M. Scott Jones is the Assistant Curator and of Education and Public Programs at the Jefferson School, the African American Heritage Center in Charlottesville, Virginia, my hometown. Born and raised in Charlottesville. And when I tell you this sister is doing God's work with the Jeff School, I'm excited for you to hear from her. She's going to give us a historical context and why inclusive teaching is so important, including in the arts. Leslie, she joined the Jeff School towards the end of 2017. She studied theater education at Virginia Commonwealth University. Leslie has been writing, acting, directing since her teen years. The world premiere of her first play, Desired Moments, was part of the 2014 Capitol Fringe Festival, and she has now gone on to write several plays, novellas, short stories, including her first novel, Bookends, which I have a personal signed copy of. That it was the cover of that book just makes me swoon. It's got this really great cover, and it's a wonderful love letter to Black love, basically. Leslie has been active in Charlottesville theater community for over a decade, and she's the artistic director of the Charlottesville Players at the Jeff School. And again, just a phenomenal woman, phenomenal woman. We also have on the call Dr. Miranda Banks, and now we're getting into the two dynamic women. Their cape is blowing in the wind behind them. I'm certain you'll see it, of Edit Media. Dr. Miranda Banks is an associate professor of film, television, and media studies in Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount University. She's an associate professor there. Her primary area of research is American film and television industries, with a specific focus on power dynamics in creative production. Let me tell y'all, this woman right here is the truth. She is not only doing the work, she deep dives in her research. She uses her research to determine how do we get more equitable practices in production, not only on set, but in the classroom. She's authored The Writers, A History of American Screenwriters and Their Guild, 2015, and she co-edited the collection of Production Studies, 2009, and Production Studies, the sequel, 2015. Her massively multiplayer game, Room at the Top, challenges implicit bias and collaborative labor, and illuminates tensions that arise between individuals. And just, she's a boss. She's a boss, and her partner in crime is equally as phenomenal. Now, I'm going to tell you about this woman, Jennifer Proctor, M.F.A. That's that Masters of Fine Arts, ladies and gentlemen. That's that terminal degree that is I have one of those too. When I tell you about that M.F.A, it is a lesson in perseverance and dedication, as well as in the arts. And I have to amplify it because those are years putting that degree together that you can't get back. But when you put it in action, like Jennifer Proctor has, it's just phenomenal. Her interests, she said her interests are ever changing. Yeah, but her creative work has explored handmade film practices, experimental documentaries, and appropriation, as well as forays into nonlinear and interactive storytelling and installation. Her scholarly and creative interests embrace issues of gender representation, cinematic deconstruction, and the history of experimental and narrative filmmaking. She and Dr. Banks have worked together tirelessly to bring us Edit Media, and I am going to bring all of these phenomenal women to the screen to say hello, good afternoon, and thank you so much for being here. Hey.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thank you. Can you introduce me every time?
Every day. You know what? I'll stand at your house and be like, bing, bing, bing. It's 7 o'clock. Good morning, everyone. This is Proctor waking up and joining the world. I want to say thank you all for coming today. And I want to say specifically about Jennifer. I would not be a part of the University Film and Video Association had it not been for her intervention, if you will. 2020 was a tough time for all of us in production, not only on set, but in the classroom. And we live in a time where the technology in production changes what feels like every 3 months, every 9 months. And so to put new technology in our students' hands not only is essential, but to be in presence with them to teach them how to do it is equally important. And with the pandemic, that was impossible for a short period, right? So all of a sudden, I ordered all this new equipment, these new Blackmagic cameras, and suddenly I couldn't be in their presence to teach them how to turn them on. Mm-hmm. So I put together a brainstorming session where I wanted to invite 8 to 10 educators to brainstorm. This is summer of 2020. I wanted to brainstorm best practices, virtual classroom, hybrid classroom, face-to-face classroom during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I reached out to about 8 to 10 people. I put something on Facebook. I'm hoping maybe 10 people will give me some time. And Jennifer popped up and she goes, "Ooh, you should tap into this organization called the University Film and Video Association. They're having the same conversation. No one knows what to do. We're beating our heads off against the wall. How do we solve these problems?" I'm like, "You're speaking my love language. What do I do?" And she said, "Okay, well, let's just cast a net and see who else will participate in this brainstorming session." We went from 8 to 10 people to 126 people worldwide, faculty from all over the globe who had some of the same questions about how to continue production courses during a pandemic. And some of those people came from the University and Film Video Association, but others were just like, "We see this thing happening. We have some of the same questions. Can we join in on the conversation?" And I think because of Jen just kind of emailing me on Facebook and saying, "Hey, you're not alone in this. Let's see who else we can invite." It just changed my life. And then she said, "Oh, and you should join this organization." And so here we are. And then 2 years later, I'm on the board of directors because I believe in what the University Film and Video Association has to offer. I believe in its mission. It has not let me down in terms of reaching out to other colleagues at other schools to collaborate and share ideas. But the one thing I noticed was that I looked to my left and my right and I saw one other Black person, and that concerned me a bit. It concerned me at the national conference to see only 2 HBCUs represented, and me being on the board representing one of those 2, I thought we can do more. It's not a question of doing better, because I think the UFVA does an incredible job at what it does, but I think more is the appropriate word, because I think what we're really talking about is extending our programming, extending our offering, not necessarily victimizing or vilifying anyone and saying, "Oh, you don't do this well, or you don't do this right." It's, we can do more. And so that's how we arrived at this symposium. And we are amplifying the works of filmmakers all over the world in a variety of different ways. And I just want to say thank you, Jen, for just kind of opening this new chapter for me. And thank you for being here today.
Yeah.
I should stand at your house and introduce you every day. My God.
Brilliant.
But this is the amazing part, because that open door that Jen brought us, TDV, and because of TDV, we are here with HBCU. There's no way we've been talking as a board member, how do we become more inclusive? How do we reach out? And you gave us the path. So I really appreciate the pathway. Thank you.
Pleasure's mine. It's the work I love doing every day, and we will continue to do so. I then will let the audience know how we're going to proceed with this session today, because this could be a love fest for hours. I'm a fan of all of these women that are on the screen right now. But I first and foremost want to bring up Leslie Scott Jones. As I mentioned before, Leslie is located, she's also a homegirl from Virginia. We both cut our teeth in Charlottesville, Virginia in a variety of different ways. But as you all remember, in August of 2017, Charlottesville became the centerpiece of, for lack of better words, and I'll just say it, bufuckery. A lot of craziness that in the name of equality and race and different things became the center of a conversation that spills over into our classrooms, certainly. As we talk about things like critical race theory and queer theory and intersectionality and all the different pieces of scholarly conversation that looks at race and gender and identity. Leslie does this work on the ground in Charlottesville. And I just want to say thank you so much for doing that work. And without further ado, what I would like to do is turn the table over to Leslie, as she will give us a historical context of why this work is so important. Leslie?
Absolutely. So yes, first of all, 2017 was interesting. I was actually in the process of directing Jitney by August Wilson. And so August 15th, my entire cast came back together for rehearsal that night. And every single one of them had been counter protesting on the street over the weekend, and nobody wanted to be in that room. Like, no one wanted to be there, including me. But because I was the director, I had to come up with some reason for them to be there. And I had no idea what I was going to say to this room of 6 men and 1 woman cast. And I just said to them, it is no longer about doing a play or even doing a play well. This is now about proving our humanity. And that seemed to be the thing that got us through doing that show at that particular time. So I do have for some reason, my slides don't want to show, but that's okay. We're gonna fix it. Not a problem.
While she's working on that, because I just saw that too. I saw that blip up and I was like, oh, you know what? I have some questions as she pulls that up, which she is managing right now. So when you saw all of the activity unfolding in Charlottesville, what were some of your thoughts as you were watching? I know I think I got a text from you, as a matter of fact. Do you see what's going on in Charlottesville right now? And I was like, what is going on in Charlottesville right now? I had no idea what was happening, because I was here in Houston, and suddenly I turned on the news, and it was the night before. It was the first day with the tiki torches on campus.
On campus. So that was the 11th.
Yeah. And
I wasn't there. I wasn't in person on the 11th, but on the 12th, I wasn't marching with everyone, just because that's not a space that I feel comfortable holding. Yeah. But what I did was I arranged at a local bar and restaurant to have like an artist's showcase, basically. So anybody that wanted to like come and like, you know, play a song or share a poem, or, you know, we had these huge pieces of paper lined out on picnic tables for people to draw, like whatever kind of art you engage in. It was like, just come and do that, like in opposition to what's going on over there.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, at the end of that day, they started, the Nazis started like branching out into town, and people, fellow activists of mine, like came and got me, and they're like, no, they are now around hunting for people. So get in this car and we're going to an undisclosed location until we know everything is safe.
And it was so smart too, because I remember Wes Bellamy, who was on the city council at the time, instructed. So here's what it looked like to me, and then we'll turn it over to your presentation. I remember looking with the riots and stuff. I'm like, I don't see any Black people. I don't see anyone I recognize. And I know they trampled my grandmother's yard. My dad had to go and fix my grandmother's front fence and everything, because her place was right down by downtown, right off of 10th and Page.
Right.
And he said they're everywhere. He was like, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And I just kept watching the TV screen, and I'm on the phone with him. I'm like, I don't see any of us though. And he goes, everyone's at Tonsil Park.
Yeah.
There was at the last minute, it was
a school giveaway.
He put together a basketball tournament and a back to school backpack giveaway.
Yep.
Just to get everyone from our community away from all that. And he was like, this is not our fight. We are not going to be a part of this. We're going to be someplace around town. And it essentially saved lives. I'm certain of it. Because I'm watching the devastation, and I just remember thinking how smart it was for you and for Wes and for some other people to say, we're taking you away from this for your safety, because I know the Black community in Charlottesville would have been right in the middle of that mix, right?
Oh yeah.
Ready to
and
roll.
Some of us were like, there were members of, BLM that were absolutely in the thick of it for that entire day. Like, a friend that, that we both know, David, he was literally standing right next to Heather Heyer when she was hit by the car.
He's in that photo that won the Pulitzer. He's the one that's airborne with his feet, his ankles literally broken in the photo, and he's airborne after the car hit him. He's the young man you see in that photo. Okay, this is a whole different discussion.
Yeah.
Because
it kind of goes into what I'm here to talk about, but yes.
Go for it.
And I just want everybody to know that, like, this is working in this place is the joy of my life. So I'm just going to give you a little history. And the reason I'm giving you this history from this perspective of Charlottesville, is that because Virginia was one of the first colonies that were given land grants by the King of England. And because there are so many presidents, former presidents of the United States, that live in Virginia and had plantations, this was sort of the proving ground of how communities operated. So Charlottesville is a litmus for every other community in the nation at this point, right? So if we go from 1790 to 1860, you can see that the population in Charlottesville, which at this point, Charlottesville is not an incorporated city. So we are speaking about Albemarle County. And you can tell by how the population changed what was actually occurring between 1790 and 1860. In 1860, Albemarle County was 53.3% Black. It was a chocolate city. Day of Emancipation in 1865, it was a chocolate city. It also had a population of 600 free Black men and women who were mostly artisans, seamstresses, tailors, carpenters, people like that. that were free and living within what would be the city limits of Charlottesville. But when we talk about Albemarle County, we have to look at what was going on during that time, right? So the average plantation was 417 acres, right? Most of the land grants that were given from the King of England to white settlers were given in the thousands. I think one of the largest ones was 17,000 acres. Well, nobody's going to have enough people in their family to work 17,000 acres, right? So you understand why enslaved labor was needed. But the average cost of this land was in 1860 about $9,000. But that translates to almost $300,000 in today's money, right? From 13,000, almost 14,000 people enslaved. So that makes Albemarle the fourth richest county in the country at that point. And all of that is because of enslaved labor. So the very first thing that Black people in Charlottesville did at emancipation was form a school. It was called the Jefferson Graded School. In 1865, it was opened by Isabella Gibbons, who you see in this picture. She is the only woman on the back row, and she's holding her diploma. This is the graduating class of Jefferson School in 1872. Isabella Gibbons was enslaved at the University of Virginia, and so was her husband, William. She would go on to be the first principal of the Jefferson School. So the very first school was started literally in a building that had been a Confederate hospital during the war. It then moved to the basement of a church. And then in 1894, there was an actual 4-on-4 constructed schoolhouse that is on the same property that the building we are in today is on. But the people of Charlottesville kept asking for a high school because the original school only went to 8th grade. So if you were Black in Charlottesville, you would go through to 8th grade, and then your parents would have to pay to send you out of town to finish high school. And the Black community spent years hounding the city to build them a high school. And finally they did in 1926. And that is the building that the Heritage Center is occupying right now. So just to give you a little snapshot, right? 1787, Jefferson writes his notes on Virginia. And in that piece of paper, he basically says that he believes that Africans are inferior to white people, right? 1860, Albemarle is the 4th richest county in the country because of the nearly 14,000 enslaved people creating that wealth. All right. The very first thing that happens after emancipation is the start of a school, right? So in 1926, we get the building that we are housed in today. In 38, they put in an addition. And in 58 and 59, they did another addition onto the building because that was during massive resistance and because they did not want to integrate schools in Charlottesville, they just added on to the Black high school. Once in 58 and then again in 59, they actually put on a gym at the end of the building. So this building is literally 4 acres long because of all of these additions. So I want to just go back to, if I can. Hold on. Resume slideshow. I just want you to look. If we can, hold on. If I can just, because I want to, it's interesting when people come into our gallery, because these, we'll go back to where it's supposed to go to. The photograph that is in our main gallery is of that graduating class. And the one thing I always ask people is to look at that photo. Hold on. If I can get this thing to do it right. Technology, it only works when you...
Trust me, Chuck, we've had all kinds of ups and downs. While you pull that up.
So here we go.
Okay, you got it. Okay.
Now, let me just
the image that you shared with us during your presentation just short of brought me to tears. Seeing that sister back there holding that diploma, holding that degree, and then to just at the same time to know that she had been enslaved on grounds at the University of Virginia. I mean,
yes.
How do you balance being a space of higher learning and human elevation while at the same time being a space of human bondage, right? It's difficult to negotiate that even still today, but this is just a remarkable image.
So when I give tours, I always stop at this image and ask, what do you see in this photo? Right? What jumps out to you? Yeah.
What jumps out to me? Is that the real question?
That's the real question.
What jumps out to me is so the people in the back, they are also students, or are they instructors?
They are all students. So the Jefferson School was begun as a state normal school, which means it taught teachers, right?
There we go.
That's how it started.
Yeah.
So almost that entire back row were students that would go on to get their licensure to teach and would come back to Jefferson to teach.
Yeah.
And almost all of them got their licensure at Hampton because that was the only place that they could get licensure at that point.
Yeah, Hampton University, which is also an HBCU.
Right.
It's learning by the sea. It's the gym by the sea is what they call it now.
Yep.
But Hampton Institute at the time would definitely have been, and many of my family members went to Hampton. I know many of your people went to Hampton and Virginia State, Virginia Union as well.
Yeah.
But this is the beginnings of inclusive teaching in the classroom.
Yes.
And the Jeff School is a part of that legacy. This picture is phenomenal.
And I love, they're holding diplomas, they're holding books, they're holding a globe. Look at this picture. They are all dressed in their Sunday best, right? This was not a jeans and t-shirt kind of thing. It was no, we have accomplished something. We are proud of it.
Yeah.
And what I tell people is that we always hear about performative Blackness in a negative way. This is the positive way, right? They knew that this picture would be looked at as an example of who they were. Yeah. So they chose to present themselves to the world in this way.
Yeah.
Right. Even Anna Gardner, who was the white woman who came down from the Freedmen's Bureau to help them set up the school. This photo was taken in 1867. 2 years after this, Anna Gardner is gone. She is gone. Isabella takes over. Right. But look how she positions turned herself in the photo. She's not facing the camera. She's turned herself profile because she understands that she is not the center of this. Right? She is an abolitionist that traveled all over the country, starting these helping Black people who had just been emancipated to start schools.
Wow. I'm looking at the little man behind her holding his lapel. He is so proud. Look at him. He is determined. He's just like, education.
Right.
All of them. This is such an amazing testament to where we come from and where we are now. Leslie, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and this great historical context.
Absolutely.
It's just a thimble. It's like an edge of a fingernail of an amount of history that goes into what it means to provide inclusive education, inclusive teaching. My family definitely recalls massive resistance where Governor Lindsey Almond refused to integrate schools in Virginia, so much so after the Brown versus Board of Education ruling that he closed down every single school in the Commonwealth of Virginia
except Jefferson. Jefferson stayed open because it was all Black.
Because the light is always on for education, boo-boo. But yeah, every single school. And so some schools closed and reopened, months later, weeks later. But schools in Fairfax County, by and large, stayed closed for almost 12 years, which is why Fairfax County has among the highest number of private schools, because private schools then took off during that time. They were like, well, the schools are not going to be open. Yes. This church is going to open a new school, or this community is going to open a new school. And
that's what Charlottesville did too.
Yeah. So you see this kind of like this uptick of private schools all over the Commonwealth open up, and it's directly connected to the insistence that we do not have an inclusive environment in education. With that, I would like to bring in then two women, and Wenhwa is going to do a proper introduction of these two women who's made it their mission then, in particular with the creative arts and in particular with film, to make sure that we are always doing work that's inclusive with all voices and all stories. Wenhwa, why don't you do us the great honor of bringing up our two illustrious guests representing Edit Media?
I couldn't do any better than what you have done, but I can talk a little bit about Edit Media, how I learned about it and how I brought it back to my institution. So I guess it's several years back when Edit Media was brought to our attention in my attention in UFVA. At that time, I wasn't a board member. I was just a member. And a couple of my colleagues were there and listening to the presentation of Edit Media, and there's a big committee of folks working on these, vetting the proposal and getting the proposal up and working, and Jen presented the website. And I'm just blown away thinking, wow, this is amazing. I don't have to show certain Birth of Nation film as a clip in my class because I have other resources. I don't have to show Godfather in my class to do parallel editing. So I was so grateful as a person of color and have witnessed all these inequality in the clip, in the teaching material in the classroom, and having seen, even when I was in graduate school, I have seen African-American students walk out of the classroom when the professor showed that film. And the argument was, it's historical, it's a classic, you have to learn this because this is a film history class. So having these innovative brain trust to work on the integrity of this collective website, I'm just very grateful. I'm very grateful for somebody who spearheaded, Miranda and Jen spearheaded in creating this website and continuously to maintain the integrity of the website and the quality of the work. So I think that's the best introduction. Both of you are kind of my mentor you know, kind of as a guiding light in my teaching career, since I have known Media. Whenever I thought, okay, how can I change this clip? I'll go search Media. That's how I introduce Media. So now you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Wenhwa. These are such generous introductions, and I'm so moved to hear them and to hear about the impact that this initiative has had. So I really appreciate that, and I'm going to launch the slides here.
And as Jen does that, I will just echo the same thing. I'm so touched and honored to be a part of this, and for Edit to be a part of this. And while Jen and I are here representing Edit Media, there are many of us here that go beyond the two of us. So we really encourage you, as we're talking, to look at the website and to continue to connect. But I want these. I'm gonna cherish these introductions. What a way to start a weekend.
And I also want to thank Leslie. That was an incredible presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you, TD. Thank you, UFVA, Prairie View A&M, for putting on this incredible symposium and for asking us to be a part of it. There's just so much here, and it just speaks to how much more we need to be having these conversations. So Miranda and I are just going to spend a little time kind of talking about Edit Media, what we do, what resources we offer, and extend an invitation to others to join the initiative. And Edit Media, of course, stands for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in Teaching Media. And as Miranda mentioned, although we kind of describe ourselves as directors, we're really more the facilitators or instigators of a variety of different events and resources that extend much beyond us. So I'm sometimes uncomfortable sort of being kind of a figurehead when really we're a collective of faculty, and that this initiative would not exist without all the incredible work from so many different people across the country and across the world who have contributed to making this what it is. So we're trying to stay on theme a little bit in this presentation. So we're going to kind of talk about some of the monsters or the ghosts that sometimes haunt us in the classroom as we're attempting to be inclusive, and the ghosts of education's past that remain present in the classroom. So that's part of our entry into the conversation today. And so I'll just spend a couple moments talking about the horror that sparked Edit Media, that is sort of our origin story. And Edit Media really did grow out of UFVA. It grew out of conversations that were taking place in the Gender Caucus, in particular about the uncritical use of violence in general, but in particular against women in student films, and how some of us were attempting to address that, but it clearly was not being addressed appropriately or significantly across the field. So there were some conversations about writing a manifesto about how we need to be addressing these things in film schools. And we kind of stepped back the idea of a manifesto as we recognized that really the audience that we needed to reach to emphasize a more inclusive approach to teaching was those who might be a little bit resistant to manifesto language. So we instead started thinking about producing an initiative, a set of best practices that could apply across film schools. And that's what sparked the initiation of some of our best practice resources. Edit Media officially launched in 2017, right after the election of Donald Trump, right as the Me Too movement was really getting underway, shortly before the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so much other brutality against people of color by the police. And so there's been an urgency, I think, in terms of thinking about how those kinds of issues can be addressed in the classroom. But also, we feel that there's a unique responsibility within film programs and media programs to think through inclusion in a critical way, because we are storytellers, right? We are dealing very intentionally with representation, with characters, with telling our histories through media. So there are specific ways in which we need to be thinking about how we go about telling the stories that we do, and specifically about how we encourage our students to be ethically and responsibly thinking through the kinds of stories that they tell through film. So
and that's collaborative work as well. I mean, this is, you know, unlike many other disciplines where a lot of the student work is one-on-one, our work so often includes partnering and to make sure that those spaces also really represent and allow the students to do their best work together. So, sorry.
No, absolutely. And we also very much recognize the incredible imbalances within the industry in terms of representation across, you know, the entire intersectional identity spectrum. And so part of what we're attempting to do is push the industry in a new, more inclusive and equitable direction by starting with a focus on our film schools. So Edit Media has produced a number of resources. We are kind of a scrappy collective of faculty. We're not a formal organization. We don't have a budget. So a lot of the work we do is just driven by faculty who have a passion about something that they want to do. But we do have a number of resources to offer. And we take a very broad approach to thinking through inclusion. So we try to, in everything that we develop, consider anti-racist pedagogy, trauma-informed pedagogy, queer crit pedagogy, pedagogy of care. We're thinking about our students as whole human beings who may have basic needs, who have family responsibilities. We're thinking about students who have experience in the military. They're veterans. They're non-traditional students. They're first-generation students. So it's a complex process of creating inclusion and equity within the classroom, and also recognizing that sometimes a teaching approach that may make one student feel included may make another student feel excluded. And so there's a negotiation that happens there. And I think that Miranda and I also very cognizant of our positionality as cisgender, heterosexual white women who are often leading, kind of presentations or trying to, instigate more resources for this organization. And it's our goal to try to use that position and leverage our privilege in order to amplify other voices, to give spaces for other people to be able to share their needs and come to us as a means of supporting efforts that they might want to create. So again, like, even though we're often kind of the ones, kind of talking about what Edit Media does, the actual work that results in the resources that we produce is happening by a huge range of faculty that often doesn't include us. And that includes a resource that we'll talk about in a couple moments that Wenhwa was a part of. So our website includes a number of different resources that we have available. The sort of hallmark, initial resources that we developed are the Edit 10, which is a set of 10 best practices for inclusive teaching specific to media production. And that was generated through a wide literature review of inclusive pedagogy, focus groups that we conducted around the country with faculty and students, surveys that we conducted with students and faculty around the country. And we consider that very much a living document. Again, this was created in 2017 before we went through a really radical shift in this country. And so there's probably ways in which that document can continue to be updated. And so we think of it as a living document. We have the Student 7, which is a document that can be shared with students to encourage them to think about their own education in an inclusive and equitable way and think about their role as students in producing that kind of an educational environment. We have the Edit 5, which also grew out of these focus groups and surveys that offers advice from faculty to administrators on how to create programs on an administrative level that support diverse faculty in an inclusive and equitable way. And then, as Wenhwa mentioned, we have a database on our website that we're constantly adding content to that provides teaching resources. So it might be film clips that help to exemplify a certain kind of film technique, but feature makers and casts that are diverse in a variety of different ways, assignments that can be used, syllabi that can be used. And then we have a regular blog that shares sort of bite-sized pieces of information and approaches that you might be able to use in the classroom. So this is just a little example of what our teaching materials database looks like. So you can search it by keyword, you can search it by type of resource, you can submit your own if you have some that you would like to share, and that does go through a sort of peer review process. So it's something that you could include on a CV as an example of something you've produced that's been peer reviewed. And so then I think I'll turn it over to Miranda, who can give us a quick overview of the Edit 10.
So when we created the Edit 10, as Jen mentioned, this was based off of an enormous amount of research with students and faculty about what was working or not working in classrooms. And at the goal of this, what we really believed was that, no student can be open to learning, and no faculty member as well can be open to inclusive teaching if we don't feel safe in the place where we work and where we learn. And we don't mean comfortable and sitting with our feet up and pampered with cookies all around us, but really being more in a safe place to be challenged, and that the work that we do in the classroom is challenging, but that we all need to start in a space where we feel safe. And this became abundantly clear in all sorts of ways to faculty and students who may not have been aware of these issues during COVID as well, because it really highlighted inequities and highlighted that certain students or faculty were facing enormous challenges in their ability to stay focused on the work of teaching and learning, while others were kind of safely, if somewhat difficult places to be. But really what we wanted to do was create for faculty a resource guide that could both kind of raise the floor for people who were new to thinking about issues of equity and inclusion, but also challenge those who were closer to the ceiling to keep pushing and progressing things forward. So the idea of these best practices was to allow each faculty member to teach to their own expertise, to encourage autonomy in the classroom, but to really foster students' creativity. And it wasn't about providing solutions, but rather about providing frameworks for teaching in a way that addressed the needs of diverse and ever evolving student body that was unique to whatever institution a faculty member was at. So the practices that we provided within the Edit 10 are holistic, they are independent, but also at the same time, one practice doesn't exist as an answer in and of itself. It's part of a longer and larger conversation about different practices. So we encourage you to go to the website editmedia.org and take a look at these, but they include things like screening widely, showing a diversity of things in the classroom, cultivating your crew, blending theory and practice, working on concept before thinking about craft. So we won't go through them all, but we really encourage you to take a look at them. One of the most recent resources that we've created was a partnership, as Jen mentioned. Wenhwa, who's here, was an incredible partner and co-collaborator in the building of an incredible document on intimacy coordination in the media classroom. So thinking about what it is when we're doing student productions, how to make safety on set something that is taught. And it's not just about cameras and lighting equipment, but also really about how to work with actors, how to teach directors about safety during scenes of intimacy on sets. And that work was an incredible and really generative collaboration between Melanie De La Rosa, who brought the project to us, and Wenhwa and her colleague Susan Kearns kind of came to us at Edit Media, and we together with Andrew Gay and Christopher Lucas built this. Again, another living document that really introduces intimate coordination, not just kind of in production, but specifically to the classroom. And again, there's a lot of amazing resources that are available to people working in the industry. But we are really thinking about classroom opportunities and classrooms that are highly resourced, as well as classrooms that are barely resourced, and how to kind of scale to your the opportunities available to you. So that document is
jump in super quick too. Like one of the key principles of this guide is the notion of consent. And so that this guide, although it's focused on intimacy coordination, can also serve as a launching point for thinking about the role of consent in classrooms in general, and boundaries, and how to, ensure that students, when they're collaborating, are doing so in a way that respects their individual boundaries, whether it's in making a film or just, doing sort of general group work. So that's another sort of core principle that we're thinking about, is just how consent is part of how we think about safety on set.
Some of the other, we wanted to point you to one of the other resources that's just came out about a month and a half ago. So about a year and a half ago, Jen and I were running a series of workshops for faculty who wanted to make a commitment to doing anti-racist and inclusive work in their classroom, and in building a kind of community of practice. We started doing a number of events, and one of those events that was really well attended, had hundreds of people join, was a talk that we gave called Anti-Racist Pedagogy in 2021. And after that event, the members of the Journal of Cinema and Media Studies, which is part of the SCMS, the Society for Cinema and Media Studies, it's their main journal, asked us to build a document as a kind of teaching dossier for them, using the speakers that we had during this panel to give advice and to talk about what they did, and have it be a document that could live longer. So we actually were able to publish that. It lives online at JCMS, and it's called Anti-Racist Strategies for Inclusive Film and Media Education. And included among the people who wrote pieces for it are people who work in various fields, so in production, in screenwriting, people who are faculty members, people who are graduate students who are both kind of teaching and learning, and as well as people who are department chairs and deans. So we were really attempting to think about, at every level of teaching and learning, how can we do this work? So we really encourage you, as well as you think about these documents, to not just explore them yourselves, but to use them as resources to share with your departments and your colleagues, because they are really holistic documents that hopefully will be useful for you. So we continue to keep doing all sorts of work. Our big project right now is to look at best practices for inclusive teaching in film and media studies. So really looking at the studies classroom and what can be done there to do transformative work. And Jen's done some incredible research that we're gonna soon be writing up.
Great. So that's sort of a quick overview of some of the work we've done so far. But again, our work is ongoing and ever evolving. And we are very much here to provide support for any projects or ideas that anyone would like to bring to us to try to make happen, that we can spread in supporting more inclusive teaching approaches in our fields. So we are always welcome for more, always open to more conversations, more ideas, more needs that need to be met. And so we join anyone who might be here to reach out to us, or even just to join our mailing list to find out about future workshops or resources that we'll be making available. So thank you so much.
Can I just put in a word here? All these are voluntary work that they put in outside their teaching and administrative time. And that's why it's so admirable in a way that it's really wellness-centered practice that they are focused on beyond their professional creative work.
Yeah.
On top of everything else they do.
I was just about to comment that very thing too. I was like, how are you doing this without a budget? You said that before you began. It's not it's not funded with any sort of external support. Who could we call on to champion this organization with some sustainability funding and get you all the support you need to keep this work going? If I'm telling the truth about it, it's one reason why I do want to highlight the Propel Center a little bit, because for what they do for HBCUs, all of a sudden my brain shut down. I was going to go to the website, but the Propel Center is an offshoot of the Ed Farm, which is based in Alabama. The Ed Farm is an incubator type organization where, just like with Edit Media, they have identified some of the blind spots in education, especially in higher education. Well, Ed Farm works primarily with K through 12, and they've moved now into higher education, which is where they've created the Propel Center. The Propel Center is now based in Atlanta. In fact, I think they're going to take up residency at Clark Atlanta University, which is a major HBCU in the Atlanta region. And what they are charged with doing is identifying programs, not just in arts and entertainment. They also give grants to universities that have new health initiatives. So to kind of close some of the gaps in ways that health opportunities, health services, insurance, those sort of gaps in Black and Brown communities that are also serviced by HBCUs. They've given funding to new and innovative programming in that respect. They also are identifying programs that have that are developing new political voices so that we can have more representation in political arenas. And, just encouraging young people to participate in the political process, to engage in all things that our Constitution says that we have the right to participate in. And they are giving funding to that. Apple the Southern Company and Georgia Power, along with Disney, have partnered with Propel Center. Apple alone gave Propel $3 million last year to divvy up how they see fit to support programming at HBCUs. And PV, my program, was actually one of the recipients of one of the first grants. We won a grant for $300,000 to produce a new show called HBCU Today. And with HBCU Today, that's what we're doing. We're amplifying what's happening in the way of teaching, service, and research at our HBCUs to bring up our, not even so much bring up our research profile, but let the world know that we too participate in research and create new ideas and solve problems. And what Edit Media is doing very specifically in the arts arena, first of all, needs that type of support. And so if you're listening, if you're watching, and you know of a foundation for which this is the mission of Edit Media is aligned, let's make those connections so that we can give these soldiers in the arts some support in doing the great work that they are doing.
Now we're just going to add this to all of the grants that we apply for in the future. But, I will just say, part of us doing all of the projects that we're doing is to make sure that when we're applying for these kinds of grants, that we have the data behind it to show impact, and, that we're aware that it matters for us to show that we're really doing something and that it's impactful and meaningful and useful before we apply for something that's going to, potentially, grow the organization. So it helps us to know who's using our resources, who's, finding them useful, because it then allows us to know, our impact and help that grow.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that Kenneth is not available today. Like I said, I just talked to the president of the Propel Center. In fact, he's texting me again with many apologies that they cannot participate in today's conversation. But we will connect Propel with Edit Media. I think in terms of the direct mission of supporting HBCUs, I don't know if Edit Media falls into that, but we can make the connection, because what we will do is connect Edit Media with HBCUs, and then through that lens, get money to Edit Media to do the work that we're talking about doing. We're going to figure it out. There's always a way, ladies and gentlemen. There's always a way. Okay, so in this part of our conversation, let's open it up to some dialogue within our group. I'm going to bring Leslie back into the mix as well. She's over there engaging her brand new puppy.
I can't help it. He's so cute.
Yeah, whatever, cute stuff. I wish I had cute stuff in here. Jen has a cat over there walking around, cute stuff. Leslie, listening to the work that Edit Media does, and given the historical context that you initiated this conversation with, tell us, through your lens, how can we use an organization like Edit Media, or specifically Edit Media, on a broader scope? Whether it's through HBCUs or K through 12, their services really do help faculty in particular with ideas and innovative ways of approaching the arts in the classroom. With your experience, in what ways could you see them fulfilling a gap?
I think, one of the things that the artists that work with me run into is they are not taught how to enter art through their own lens, right? So a lot of artists that work with Charlottesville Players Guild are pleasantly surprised when I tell them that, we work from within the Black aesthetic, which means, a lot of the things that you learned in normal, and I'm using quotes, normal practice, just don't apply here. There's a very different way of entering the practice that the Black aesthetic offers. And I've had actors come to me afterwards and be like, wow, I never even, like, nobody taught me this. It's like, right, because unless you have a Black theatrical teacher who also had a Black theatrical teacher, like, you're never going to get that. So I think the best way to make impact is through curriculum building, right? Whether it's at an HBCU or a PWI or a high school or whatever, just making people aware that there is more than one way to enter practice.
Yeah.
And that all of those roads are valid. And that, you know, I mean, what my high school theater teacher served me well. It really did for the first, like, you know, 20 some years. But I needed something else to get me to the next stage. And, you know, if I hadn't met mentors like Dr. Tanya Pettiford-Waits, you know, I wouldn't have clued into that.
Sure. It sounds too that with an organization like Edit Media, a big piece of it is really getting the word out that you exist, that your resources are available, first of all, in a virtual context. I spent some time looking at your website, and it's an embarrassment of riches, quite frankly. I'm going to share it on the screen here in just a second. Let me, there we go. All the ways that, and you expressed this in your presentation, but all the ways that Edit Media can help you immediately can be realized in this tab here, the teaching materials. This tab in particular, and if there was a donate tab somewhere on here, that would be, I mean, you know,
very smart.
A QR code at the very least that says, hey, if you love the syllabus, or, you know, because this is still somebody's intellectual property, right? You know, when you think about, I think about Chrissy's presentation this morning on the Twilight Zone, and I know she said that work is here on the site too. She should benefit in some way. Edit Media should benefit in some way by having to take some of the heavy lifting out of our hands. I know in a way you're making this work available because it does assist in extending, what is the phrase? Extending empathy in our pedagogy. But at the same time, this is still someone's hard work. This is still Edit Media's hard work to make available. So first of all, I'd say that. Don't give this stuff totally away for free, because it does change everything. It will change it. It will change an entire program, quite frankly, if they're doing this work.
Can I just say something to Leslie's comment that I think was just very meaningful? Is the idea that a lot of students are passionate about film and television and media making and social media, and they come to a university or college and are excited to learn. And oftentimes in that classroom, what they are introduced to as the canon is wildly different than the canon that excited them about learning about media. And it's a moment of surprise. And I think that there's a really, there's an opportunity that Jen and I often talk about when we're looking, when we're speaking to faculty about really asking students themselves to articulate their canon, and the faculty member to articulate their canon, and that this is not, there might be something that's coded as the official thing that's presented, but to deeply understand that different media brought us all to this field, and that each one of those is worthy of engaging with, and invites curiosity from all of us, and that can be an opportunity for sharing between students, for them to connect on what are their favorite movies, and rather than just talk about it as favorite movies, to really think about it as a canon,
Yeah.
you know, and change that language from being something that only faculty or, you know, AFI is allowed to determine of the best
Ooh.
movies, but rather to really think about, you know, what's meaningful to us as upcoming makers and creators and lovers of cinema.
Yeah.
If I can just add to that really quick, we're still analyzing the surveys that we've done with students, but sort of anecdotally, the number one comment that comes up in the surveys when we ask students, you know, what makes them not feel fully included in the classroom is that they don't see themselves reflected in what's shown as examples. And I think that speaks both to they don't see themselves represented as, you know, characters or as makers, but also that, like, as Miranda and Leslie were both saying, they don't see the aesthetic, you know, that they, or the sort of history of the aesthetic that they're coming from represented in what's shown in class. So I think there's a really tight relationship between, you know, the canon and the aesthetics and sort of the styles and approaches that the canon has established, and just a simple feeling of like seeing oneself in the work and imagining oneself going into the industry, and, you know, seeing oneself being successful as a filmmaker, doing the work that they feel passionate about.
Yeah. The puppy knocked over your camera, Leslie? It's that puppy.
I have a question regarding to, and a thought regarding to the right way to really bring the process to a multicultural classroom.
Yeah.
And because I can't, in the intimacy coordination work, I have learned to say, I cannot take on this job because this is not my lane. This is there's a part of culture that I do not understand. I will recommend somebody else to take on this job. So perhaps Leslie and maybe TD can also talk about when we have this really wonderful resources like Edmedia, and then there's a really great examples of classroom teaching material. How can we be more inclusive once we started, like we got a mandate from the higher up from the administrator, say, let's create this, let's redesign the foundation class, make it more inclusive. So who am I to make that proper judgment? How can we reach out for some sort of mentorship? Perhaps it would be the next level, just like in intimacy coordination. If I am asked to do a job and that's not an area I'm comfortable, I will ask for a cultural consultant to be hired on the film set. Could this be a possibility of something that Edmedia would consider to create a list of a cultural consultants, sort of kind of positioning to say, if you're creating any curriculum that is you want to check, or peer review, kind of like if this is really truly inclusive in terms of your curriculum, your work example, your assignment, maybe there could be some sort of support on vetting overall curriculum in details. That's just a thought, because we want to move towards the right direction, but I also understand my limit, so that's why I have this question.
Yeah, I think having someone to look at your curriculum and say, hey, this thing is missing, or you might think about adding, is a great way to make sure that what you're presenting is a full representation of the American canon. Like, if that's what you're teaching, like I always tell people, like, there's Black theater and there's white theater, but all of it really is American theater. Right? It's all American theater because it was all created by people who lived an American existence. It's just that society has said that those two existences are vastly different. So people learn that Western, right, way of doing things, and that has been canonized and approved because academia approved it. And the Black canon still exists. It was created right alongside the white canon. It just hasn't been accepted by academia to the point where it is rote to put it into a curriculum.
We were discussing yesterday in another panel the history and I guess the verbiage around Blaxploitation during the Black Arts movement of the 1970s. And it really is all about positionality, right? Because if you were to ask many people who work in the industry, especially white, cis, heterosexual white men, about Black films in the 70s, in particular that demographic, they'll say, "Oh, that was the era of Blaxploitation." And you ask people like myself or Leslie or folks who are a bit more extending empathy, understand, what's more inclusive in language, you would refer to it as the Black Arts movement. And it's this idea of perception and perspective, right? And it sounds to me, and maybe Jen and Miranda, you can expand on this some, in your work, how much of it is about teaching the humanities and not just technique and technology and theory and focusing on the art itself? How much of it is about, say, let's put the cameras aside and let's talk about relationships. Let's talk about empathy. Let's talk about perspection and perception. Allie yesterday, I'll ask the question and I'll let you answer it. Allie yesterday said something that was really interesting about some students in Nashville and in Tennessee in general, getting some of the students at HBCUs to film some of the civil rights stories out of Tennessee in general and in Nashville and Memphis. And I said, well, why don't the students at the PWIs shoot those stories too? Like, why don't the students at the predominantly white institutions also cover those civil rights stories? Why does that must fall on the shoulders of the HBCUs? Mm. And it then isn't about people not wanting to cover it. It's more about perspective and perception. So how do we teach that as well? Is there a way to teach a bunch of white students, hey, these stories are a part of the American story too. You should tell these stories as well, right? How do we teach that?
I mean, I think that's a fantastic question and one that I know that I'm constantly grappling with in my own teaching. But I do think that empathy becomes sort of the critical lens for approaching that very question. And I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, empathy itself is a creative act. And what I try to teach my students about empathy, because storytelling is all about creating empathy for characters, including characters that we might not like, right? We still might have empathy for a villain. But empathy, I ask my students to define it, and they'll often say, well, it's walking in someone else's shoes. But we try to get a little bit more nuanced about that to consider that it's not imagining yourself in someone else's shoes and what you would do if you were that other person. It's imagining what it's like to be them. And that requires research. It requires understanding. It requires talking to people who are different from you. And that's often, like, especially for my more mainstream students, something they haven't really considered before. And really kind of thinking about the research that you need to do to ethically and responsibly write characters that are different from you and have different experiences from you. So it's, to me, it's fundamental. Like, you can't be a storyteller if you're not thinking about those things, period. So I think that's for me what I'm really thinking a lot about. And it requires, empathy requires imagination, right? It requires being able to think outside your own experience. And so I find that can be a useful hook for students, because they want they want to be creative, they want creative freedom, and experiencing empathy, which then becomes like a responsibility, is still part of creativity. So that's how I've been thinking about it.
And we all need to be thinking about it, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead, Leslie. She took us to church.
We've been doing it a little different. I teach a class called the Black Theatrical Voice, and it's a 10-week class, and each week we read a play, and we go through the themes of the play, the storyline, how it's different, but we start from the Black aesthetic, meaning we're talking about story, not plot. Meaning we're talking about a continuum, of a transformative continuum, not a linear plot line where everything is wrapped up in a cute bow at the end.
Right.
And something that I started last year, which has gone really well. Every week there's a section of the class that's called What's White Supremacy Got to Do with It? And it takes each play and it talks about the tenets of white supremacy and how these tenets are played out in this piece of art, right? So it's a linkage. And then the conversation just organically happens where they're like, oh, but I do that in my real life. Do you? You do that in your real life. Oh, and you never noticed. Okay. Maybe you should go and think about that. You know, like, so yeah, like absolutely empathy is a thing, but I think the next step is to show them how these things play out, how they are so ingrained in our society that we just do them without even thinking.
Yeah.
Because once we're aware, then there's like, oh, wait, that's right. I just got taught about duality and how that's a concept of the Black aesthetic, and not everything has to be one way, both and, right? Yes, and things can be two things, opposite things can be true at the same time. Oh, okay, yeah. And then you can live into it, right?
I don't know. I hate to be the cynical voice on that last thing you just said about building that muscle of empathy and folks being able to do that as they walk and talk on this. I think things like social media gets in the way of that. I think with platforms like social media, where it is so important for each of us as individuals, where 8 billion people have the possibility to say exactly all the things that they're thinking, and because the internet has no tone, there isn't a sense of being able to get a feel for how a person says something or means something. We live in a time where our main instruments do not encourage empathy. It does not encourage the practice of thinking or having a critical thought on a tweet. And I'll admit for myself, I have read something, I'm like, ooh, and have a knee-jerk reaction to it. And I'm like, no, I should probably research this thing. I should probably learn to make sure, you know, the time it happens the most, and it's mind-blowing that it happens, is when someone will post happy birthday to a famous person that's long passed away. We know that person has passed away, but then it will somehow turn into, oh, so-and-so just died. So-and-so just passed away. And it's like, if you did some research instead of just taking that tweet for that its sole value as it is, and learn about what was being shared, maybe you would know that person died 5 years ago. We wouldn't have this trending thing. So I know that's probably a really bad example, but my point though is that we live in a time where we will read a very short bite of something and then take off running with it without doing proper research, without being empathetic and looking at maybe that argument from someone else's perspective. I think our tools prevent that. I just went on a rant. I thought I had a question. I don't know. Someone has a comment. Ladies, thinking about Game of Thrones, not the remake now, but the show that in my mind was so dynamic and interesting, and I loved it until you just start to clock how many times women were just brutalized and not in any way, form, or fashion held up in a positive light of power. Either it was so far weak and docile and not being able to care for herself, or Cersei, which, I mean, I kind of like Cersei, but that's beside the point. How does something like Edit Media kind of look at a show that simply had no compassion for women whatsoever and try to counteract that in the classroom and in production?
Miranda, do you want to take that one?
Well, I think I mean it's complex, and also the show transformed over time. What it was at its beginning is maybe something different than what it was at the end, and its problems at various points. I mean, I didn't watch it for a long time because of that level of violence, and you know, we often think about saying, you know, we don't, as Jen started talking about the work that we do, that it you know, and the reason that Edit Media really started was around violence against women in student film productions. And yet, if that violence was represented from a different positionality, if that experience of violence put us in a different point of view, or it's not the violence itself that is necessarily the problem, but how it is a part or not a part of the story, how it is someone who is centered or decentered, or is the subject or the object of you know, what's happening. And so, you know, I'm always trying to kind of capture students where they're watching things, and really try to stay away from a kind of like this is not okay to watch, but rather to go, you know, what is it that we enjoy? Where is this show succeeding in its storytelling, and how is it building out these characters, and yet where is it also failing particular characters? And if we can look at two side characters and see how differently they're treated, how much story time they're given, how much perspective, how much kind of vision, and how much we see the world for their point of view, then we get to see, you know, this you know, what's white supremacy got to do in fantasy land of Game of Thrones, you know, and how is it creating these different kinds of narratives, even in the realms of the fantastical or the science fiction, right? And yet at the same time, it's not. I think that we all really often try to stay away from bad media, good media, but really to help students find the nuance. You know, what is this thing really inviting and creating, and, you know, where is it an opportunity? And then also, where are the parts that are problematic? Where are its challenges? You know, and, you know, if we think about, I'm a historian, I'm not a maker. And for me, you know, I teach film history, and I'm constantly talking to students about the struggles and frustrations of, you know, that film history is full of deeply complicated people, of really, really problematic individuals and films, and that rather than shying away from them, or rather than avoiding them, we need to understand that that is always going to be there, and that we need to learn this as a process of, you know, what's wrong with our idea of putting filmmakers on pedestals, or putting particular films on pedestals, or defining a canon, or, you know, what is it about these complicated films or complicated people that we are putting so much attention on, and saying they're the bad guy or they're the problematic person. And it's in part because of the power that they once had, and perhaps also the power that they're in the process of losing.
Ooh.
And it is only in the process of them losing power that we are willing to take a stand and suddenly say, oh, this person's bad, that, Harvey Weinstein wasn't attacked and, wasn't kind of brought up as a problematic person until his career was starting to go down, right?
Sure.
And so it's much easier to put him on the attack at that moment. So that's what I love about film history. That is what I love about this field is let's get into the weeds and let's not kind of make it so easy, but rather teach our students how to have those conversations and how to have those difficult, in the same way that we talk about difficult conversations in our, in our classroom or on our campuses and, in our dorm rooms, we need to have those difficult conversations in our history books and in our understanding of, who we love and the filmmakers that we love that, I love Polanski. I love Woody Allen, whoever it is. And it's like, how do we grapple with this and really helping our students grapple so that it doesn't become about avoidance, but rather an opportunity to speak to the discomforts in a comfortable space, in a space that feels safe.
Yeah. Ooh, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, we have to bring this conversation to an end. I don't even know what to say. I know Allie hopped on to say hello and to join us and give us greetings. And she also is a part of Edit Media. She's watching from Nashville. We mentioned her a few times earlier in the broadcast. I just want to thank you all so much for participating in today's discussion. And as Wenhwa said, let's go beyond the discussion and get to the action of all of this. I am excited. I think my wife is also watching, and she's going to hear me say I would love to participate and work with Edit Media and volunteer in any way that I can. And I hear her say, you are finishing up your dissertation. You can't add anything else to your plate. And I'm like, I'm sorry, hun. I'm just going to do it anyway because their mission is so awesome and I want to play in their sandbox. Yeah, so there's that. If any of you want to get to know any of the organizations that you've heard from at greater length today, you can certainly go to the Jeff School, the Jefferson School's website, jeffschoolheritagecenter.org. You're also invited to get to know Edit Media more definitively by going to their website, editmedia.org. Again, there's so many great resources there on their website. Certainly continue to support the University Film and Video Association by visiting our site, UFVA.org. And ultimately, with this particular symposium, you can see all of our previous programming at the website, KPVU-TV.org/symposium. I think there may be one more comment. Allie said, yay. Of course, I can hear her voice. You can hear her voice as well. And meetings. Of course, there's always meetings. Meetings are always in the way of things. But you know what? Allie is supporting us from Nashville, and we say thank you, and we love you dearly. I am going to preview what we are seeing next at 2:00 today. We have yet another panel of amazing scholars discussing the intersection between history, realism, and cinema. We're going to look very specifically at Lovecraft Country, Candyman, Black Klansman through the lens of the work of Laura Johnson. She's a student, actually, at the University of North Carolina at Asheville. She's going to present her work, Peeling Back the Layers of Black Horror. And you can notice there on the screen, she's using Jordan Peele's last name as a play on words, and peeling back the layers. Also, we have Dr. Cynthia Barron. She is going to pay homage to the brother, Michael K. Williams in Lovecraft Country. We lost him in the last year. Talented performer, great person on the planet. And Dr. Barron from Bowling Green State University, she will give her presentation, Michael K. Williams in Lovecraft Country, giving expression to the horrors of realism. Let me tell y'all, I'm so excited about this conversation that's about to happen at 2 p.m. That I'm about to pop, because when we are talking about Black horror cinema, we are looking at a genre of art that heavily relies on American history and realism. And so as an extension of the conversation you just heard from the Jeff School and Edit Media, I think if you will join us at 2:00, you will get some greater context in why movies utilize our traumatic history as a base for storytelling, why it is important, why sometimes it can also be harmful, but at the same time, it amplifies an American history that we all should know plenty and more about. I hope you all have an amazing afternoon. I hope you join us again in the next few minutes. But in the meantime, I'm going to grab something to eat and get myself a little water and be back at 2:00 with you. All right, y'all. Bye.